Inevitably, future applicants to business school consider the return that they're making on a significant investment, both in time and in money. If you look at the Forbes rankings, which make a very simple calculation of ROI, it's interesting to see how European schools actually run away with that calculation in the early years after business school. And one school in particular, IMD, has dominated the Forbes ranking for the one-year program. It's a remarkable one-year intensive boot camp in Lausanne on the borders of the shores of the lake. And I'm delighted to be joined by Maisie Borrows, who is a graduate from the class of 2019. Maisie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, IMD, of course, has its roots 60 years ago with multinationals like Nestle and Big Pharma, companies like Novartis that have been the next steps of your career. Perhaps you can just briefly describe, working in healthcare in the current crisis that the world faces. Very interesting times. Tell us a little bit about the position you've taken on with Novartis.
Sure. So I joined Novartis at the start of February. My role is strategic assistant to the global head of Novartis Business Assurance and Advisory. What that basically means is that I'm a chief of staff to the head of internal audit and also a number of other third line defense functions to the company. It's been very, very interesting first 3 months there. I was lucky to have my first 6 weeks in the office, which definitely helped kind of getting to know people face to face before we then moved to some virtual working. And obviously, things have been evolving, adapting day to day.
I do feel that it will be business school graduates that are helping to find a way beyond this crisis and solutions for next steps. Now, of course, at undergrad, you'd studied psychology at UCL, and you'd spent 3 years with PwC. Then worked for a think tank as a research manager role that itself was working in the healthcare space with Big Pharma. So was IMD a natural choice given the sort of connections that it has with companies like Novartis?
Yeah, certainly. And as you've said, in my career to date before IMD, I'd done a lot of work in healthcare, but I'd always worked more on the public sector side. And I felt to be a leader in healthcare, which is my aim, I needed to have that private sector experience as well, so I could sort of see the whole picture of the healthcare value chain. So for me, IMD was a very clear choice at a business school because it has these very, very strong links to pharma companies, and it's based in a country that itself has some of the headquarters for the top pharma companies in the world. So that for me was a clear reason to come to the school, and obviously a very strong alumni network with some top leaders in that space.
Right. As you look at the one-year program and the intensity of that format, both in terms of what you're fitting in learning, all of the networking with 89 other classmates in this fantastic ratio of students to faculty, do you think it was important to have a clear sense of where you wanted the next steps of your career to go, or were other classmates, themselves exploring and looking to change sectors and functions?
So I'd say this is where a one-year program does differ from a two-year program. And this is certainly something that I would advise everyone considering an MBA to think quite carefully about. A two-year program, you definitely have more time to give your next career steps more thought. And normally on a two-year program, you would have the chance to do a summer internship, have the chance to really test the waters out. A one-year program, you just don't have the time. And to be honest, you don't have a lot of mental space. There is obviously some time to give your career next steps, but I would advise people considering one-year programs to at least have an idea of where they want this program to take them. You don't necessarily need to know specifically. I mean, for me, it was either try and get a job in a pharma company, or if not, a consulting job that worked closely with pharma. And I sort of had those as my two options. But I would advise anyone who is considering 1 year to really kind of think quite carefully about their career next steps before they go into the program.
Right. Now, of course, leadership development is a big component of that, and the school really stands out for a very in-depth and elaborate admissions process. They have, day-long sessions, obviously, that you yourself took part in. Was that actually very helpful to then, think about where business school fits at this stage in your personal and professional development?
Yeah, certainly. I think for me, actually, the admissions day was what decided IMD for me. So the experience I had on campus, getting to meet our dean, getting to meet some of the other professors, the recruitment team, just experiencing that immersive, that sort of immersive learning experience that IMD is famous for, through things like its integrative exercises, made me realize that actually this is the right place for me. I don't just want to focus on academics. Academics are very important, but to really become a successful business leader, I need to really develop some of those core leadership skills that will serve me well in the future. And after that admissions day, I knew that IMD would give me that.
As you reflect on that intensive year, what have you learned about yourself as a potential leader, beyond perhaps some of those mechanics and business skills that you've developed?
Yeah, I think there are probably three key things I've learned about myself. I mean, there were hundreds, but the things that I still sort of go back to. Firstly, human resilience knows no bounds. You think you're exhausted and you need to finish whatever you're doing, but you can keep going and you can keep pushing yourself. And this MBA year at IMD is a real test of that, but in the most fantastic and inspiring way, because you realize quite how much you can actually achieve if you set your mind to something. So when I'm now facing challenges in the workplace, I just think back to what I achieved last year, and suddenly those challenges seem quite small. So it's good to have had that experience and know that I can really push myself. I think secondly, for me, the importance of always wanting to learn and learn new things, not just about the environment around you, but about yourself. I think IMD really, I've always been someone who's enjoyed learning, but IMD and the MBA program really kind of cemented that in me, that I want to, throughout my career, always learn and improve and seek feedback. I think too many people and too many leaders don't ask for feedback and don't try to improve and learn, and actually the importance of feedback and how you can sort of develop even as a very senior business leader, for me, is something that I'll carry throughout the rest of my career now. And finally, I think I underestimated before I went to IMD how much culture does actually matter in a business environment. And learning and respecting other people's cultures when you're working in an international environment is, actually how important that is, and how much that can lead to productive team working. That was something that I only really experienced once I went and did my MBA and was in a class of, I think it was 39 other cultures. So that for me are my three big takeaways beyond just the key business skills.
Well, I mean, bearing in mind, with a class of 90, there's that sense as one of the top schools that you're handpicked, that they're thinking about this dynamic of how you will then interact with a banker from Brazil and a marketing exec from Johannesburg and so on. From that perspective, what would your advice be to applicants to the IMD program, in terms of then sharing your own personal story and background?
I think for more around the sort of program in the school more generally, just because the class size is small doesn't mean the program should be underestimated. I think actually there's a beauty in its smallness, and the bonds you form with people, the network you create from every day in, day out for a whole year, always being with the same people, traveling around the world together on the Discovery expedition. You learn so much about each other, and I think that network, I will now have for the rest of my business life. And someone who did our leaver speech on our graduation said something really beautiful, I thought. He said, if any of you call me at any time, email me with any help you need, I will always respond and I will always be there. And that's how I feel about my 89 other classmates as well. And I think that's something very special and unique to IMD. I think more from a personal side, what I would advise any applicants to an MBA program is, on day one, you might walk into that room and think, oh my goodness, everyone here is so qualified and so bright and so driven. You know, what am I doing here? What do I have to offer? I think a lot of us feel that imposter syndrome a lot of the time in the business world. At least I have in the past. But don't underestimate yourself and don't undersell yourself. You're there for a reason. You've been picked. The school has seen real potential in you, and just go in there and be yourself. Be willing to learn, be willing to be humble, but also, you know, sort of speak up when you have a point, and have the confidence in your own abilities that you'll be able to sort of do a fantastic job throughout the year.
And that sense of self-confidence, but with humility, is that something that you feel you're already bringing to your new role at Novartis?
I hope so. I think sometimes in the workplace, MBAs can have a slight stigma attached to them. And I think anyone should be aware of that when they do an MBA and then go into the workplace afterwards. You know, yes, you might know sort of a supply chain operation very well after an MBA, or you might know, you know, sort of how a lot about accounting or a lot about finance, whatever it is. But there are still people in that job who probably have worked in that business for much longer than you. And there's still lots for you to learn. And I think for me now, it's about finding those areas where I think my MBA can add value, and really sort of going after those. But at the same time, you know, having the humility to know that I'm there to learn, and I'm not going to just sort of walk in from day one and try and change everything, which sometimes after an MBA you are in the habit of doing.
Because I suppose, just coming full circle, we started by talking about IMD's, how well they measure in some of these rankings, but of course the rankings are very limited, and no one's ever been able to put a number on building an individual's self-confidence, and I always see that as one of the extraordinary takeaways, certainly when it's matched with humility.
Yeah. It's a shame in a way that there aren't more ways to measure like the personal transformational impact of a year, because for me that's really what IMD gave me. It gave me the whole package. It didn't just give me the business skills or the network or the international exposure. It really changed me as a person. I know that sounds slightly over the top, but it did. I went into that year with a lot less self-confidence than I did coming out of it, and a lot less resilience. And I think those are some of the skills that actually you really, really need to, you know, be successful in whatever path you choose to do going forward. So yeah, it's something that I wouldn't underestimate about an MBA program.
Right. It's always a little more flat when it's written on a website, but when you actually hear that directly from people such as yourself, certainly that's a perspective that, you know, we love to be able to capture for these CentreCourt events. So, Maisie, thank you very much for sharing your own experience at IMD. I hope that with the crisis that the world is facing, that Novartis and others, you know, you'll have that sort of positive impact. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.